Good morning, everyone. The first thing I must do is to thank the magnificent rector and São Paulo University for having given to me this cathedral. I am especially happy with the patron of the cathedral. Teresa Cristina was the last empress of Brazil, and she brought to Brazil Italian culture. As a descendant from Italians, my mother was Italian, I am happy that she brought this to Brazil. The Brazilian elite, when she came, was very limited and French-oriented. But the intellectuals, middle classes, they had nowhere to look. And she brought Italian culture. She brought opera. She brought books. She brought one of the best archaeological museums, which was her private collection of archaeology, which she had started when she was a child. And most of all, she did all the efforts to have peace. Even in the Paraguay, the Triple Alliance War, she made efforts with her son-in-law, Conde Duc, and the emperor to fill and survive an agreement to end the war. She was an extraordinary figure. And she was called the mother of the Brazilians because when there was a very, very frightful epidemic of cholera, she refused to leave the city of Rio de Janeiro and remaining taking care of the people. So she's a very important figure. But I'm not here to speak about her because I'll do this many times. I am going to speak about the worldwide impact of international dispute resolution and its evolution. International dispute resolution has roots in state disputes since immemorial times because of the saying that par inter parem non habet imperium. Then, in modern era came the Hague Convention. The Hague Conventions just codified the practice that existed up to the time they were created. They brought back diplomatic efforts, they brought back fact-finding, they brought back facilitating, mediating, and arbitration. When we arrive now, what people call postmodern times, we arrive to a different thing. We arrive to a world where the arbitration and mediation are going to grow more and more. Why? Because the nature of in-states disputes is linked directly to the uniqueness of the situations. Either they are related to territorial needs, either they are linked to abuses of human rights, political aspects, and other things which are unique to the states involved. And they need something that is made fit for the situation. And only arbitration can be fit and designed for all cases of arbitration. Then we have another route of arbitration in dispute resolution, the merchant dispute. In the Middle Ages, when we had jus gentium and lex mercatoria. In the Middle Ages, the merchants in the cities where they were, they needed to have a law that they did know. They could not adapt to the customs of every city they went. It would be possible. And more than this, they have a problem because they came from different origins. There were people coming from Holland, people coming from Germany, people come from Italy, and everywhere in Europe that had an affair in some city. It could be Cologne, it could be Paris, it could be Rouen, everywhere. And when they met, what they were looking for, a pragmatical way of settling the situations. sort of they had they could trace the origins to what is now the Convention into International Sales of Goods. The link is there, it's clear. It's the creation of a law that is to be used in commercial relations. But we have then the traditional 20th century commercial arbitration. The 20th century commercial arbitration started after World War I with the creation of one of the most important centers of arbitration, which is the ICC. ICC was created to promote commerce and to solve disputes. And she does it, and has been doing this since its foundation. And it's one of the organisms created by the peace conference after the First World War to maintain the peace in the world. And if I remember, because I have lived these times, when the Cold War was approaching to the end, most of the political scientists said that the only way to finish the World War and the Cold War would be to reach more and more trade, because the links of trade would eliminate hostilities, because you need peace and security to have trade. In the 21st century, we have a big evolution, because the arbitration which was made with thousands of papers, and I am used to it yet, because sometimes I am in arbitration where I receive 8 big boxes, need a special chariot to carry this to my office, with paper in an arbitration. The amount of paper is enormous, and the small finger of discovery has a big weight, and it grows. But then we are going to get a new way of doing this through electronic procedure. It has been done in courts of justice, like in Brazil. Now all the superior courts have one program for electronic procedure. I have been working in many cases outside of the state of São Paulo without leaving my chair, from my computer. And this is very important, and where the notion of blockchain appears, because you have a property in what you put in arbitration. And this property, what it is? The data that you have. And blockchain protects data. Blockchain protects the transmission of data and the recording of data. And it identifies who is the owner. So I won't go discussing what is blockchain, because this will be discussed better and more deeply in another moment. Then we arrive to a third type of problem or solution, which are states versus merchant disputes. There is where appeared investment arbitration. But investment arbitration between states is not the only case where merchant and arbitrators and states litigate. It's also commercial cases. NAFTA is an example where this occurs. It's a modern way. In a special paper I made for Foreign Law Review, I made an examination of all the mechanisms for integration, economic integration, and regional groups of integration, where I showed that there is no one that does not contemplate this kind of arbitration. So the future links to have these two things: arbitrations which are electronic, arbitrations which are linking states and giving the individuals and everyone interested an access directly to the courts of arbitration to solve their problems. From in states dispute resolutions to today, we have an evolution also, because it started political and territorial matters, the continuation of tradition. But now, ICC and other courts have been admitted officially by the United Nations and the United Nations International Law Commission as a way. But more important, WTO entered into the field. WTO has a very important function because it's the first international law way of solving disputes that has sanctions, effective sanctions. So it can be implemented, it can produce results, and it created the way and paved the way for many other agreements to do the same thing. So you have many of the regional agreements making a copy of this. But if you think a little bit, you see that law is fractal. What you see in the biggest image also reproduces in the smaller one, and the smaller ones, and the smaller ones. Or like a galaxy, where the things are in different places and different sizes, but you see it as one unit. So I have no surprise that this has happened. In commercial arbitration, the perspectives is that we left the Gutenberg galaxy, where paper was emperor. We entered the new digital era. And the question that I put in arbitrations, is paper dying? Will paper disappear or will be remaining? Here in São Paulo, the experience in the many chambers of arbitration is that we have a mixed procedure. People put an original in paper in the chamber, and all the other documents, and etc., go in digital way to the arbitrators and the other parties. The problem is a problem of protecting the property, which is made by paper. It's a transition for the moment where we will have blockchain technologies. So that is where electronic arbitration, blockchain techniques are important in the evolution of arbitration. In state and merchant arbitrations, the perspectives start very long. Start when Hesa-Pahlavi nationalized many oil companies in Iran. And I remember this because one of my first academic works was about the Iranian cases. And that is where the classical investment arbitrations appeared, where many stories appeared, and was a big fuss about it, with underdeveloped countries claiming that was unfair. The developed countries said, yes, it's fair, but it had an important effect that it was not done anymore in the point of a gun. So Commodore Perry could retire, and his disciples also. The question became a question of law. Then came the treaties of international arbitration. These treaties, which we consult by BITs, have all of them arbitral clauses. And the arbitral clauses have been more or less successful, but we have now a doubt. Will the BITs grow or will BIT decrease? The problem is that if BITs do not adapt to the changes in the world, which are very quick, very, very quick, it will decrease. If it adapts, it will grow. Adapting is a question of survival. And Darwin is there to prove in the nature that the survival is of the more apt to adaptation and to change to different worlds. But now we'll have new persons and new alternatives. You have a recent decision of the European Court of Justice saying that the European Union cases are to be of international investment arbitrations are to be dealt by the Union Europea, no more by the states that signed the BITs. This is a trend that might be, and still is, very discussed and very interesting. Then you have other new alternatives which are being created, for instance, by the former government of Brazil, of creating a system where you didn't have arbitration. You were forced to go to mediation. If it didn't work, You could come back to diplomatic negotiations, and from there I don't know where we would go. Investments would suffer, would be more difficult, and people would lose money. I thank you very much for the attention you gave, and I hope not make anyone sleep. Thank you very much.